Welcome everyone. I'm Ranjan, founder of DecisionX. With me, Rishank, is Chief AI Officer at DecisionX. I also have Shantha with me. Shantha needs no introduction. Shantha is a global leader, has worn many hats, but was ex-MD at Accenture, CSO at Carelon Group, and a leadership role she was having at GCC of EY. So thanks, Shanta. Thanks, Rishank, for joining in. So just to set up the agenda for the conversation today, what we have, guys, is a quick roundup of what DecisionX does, how we are powering AI-led decision making for enterprise. Then Rishank is going to run all things enterprise reasoning live,
Mm,
which is the theme of the this webinar, where we're going to show you live like what constitutes reasoning, how reasoning is being done, how you can tackle signals that is already there in the data. How do you start making sense of what questions, why questions, just the potential of enterprise reasoning that is possible. So that we will run for first 20-25 minutes. And then I have Shanta with me, so we'll straight up get into a panel discussion with Shanta around all things that she has seen from her side of the table of decision makings comprising of large enterprises, both at buy and sell side, and what does really the failure notes on decision making that happens despite all tools that enterprise does have. Why does decision making slow down and where the gaps are? So yeah, these are the points that we'll be covering. So that's pretty much the agenda for next 60 minutes that you guys are gonna listen, hear all that stuff. So over to you, Rishank.
yeah. So thanks for setting in the agenda, sir. So I think just to brush up on the basics from last time around, we are DecisionX. The reason we even exist in the first place is to solve for decision making, and what we are bringing to life is the platform for AI-led decision making for the enterprises of today and tomorrow. Now, all of this is powered by the way we bring cognitive ontology, and that is something that was the theme of the last webinar. So today we actually want to dive deeper into what it truly means to have a multi-layered reasoning system in place, and where is it that the AI systems or the agentic systems that are sort of promised or claimed or shown in demos, the pre-recorded ones at least. Where do they lack today, and why is it that we exist, and what is it that we bring to the table? So I'll just spend the first couple of minutes just with a general walkthrough, and then we, instead of keeping the people waiting post the 5 minute or 7 minute mark, we'll just dive straight into the platform and we'll try to do some form of multi-layered reasoning live. So yeah, just going ahead. So just as a general primer, what is typically enterprise reasoning? So the one sort of place with which people tend to have a worldview on or come from is comparing reasoning with retrieval. Now, retrieval at the end of the day is all about finding what exactly is in our data today. So you want one system where you're, let's say, typing something in natural language, and you are just able to figure out, okay, basis this query, what are the documents or data which typically exist in tabular forms exist out there? What can I bring from here? How can I then synthesize the answer on top? And this is typically where all agentic systems are today, where they have retrieval. They try to plumb together context from different sources. They try to plumb together all the tribal knowledge that exists in their head today and try to reach to some form of reasoning, which is, of course, extremely basic, that being one. The other, that you then end up spending a lot more time in actually trying to come up with a causal understanding of your state of business, or a causal understanding of what can actually be done right, even if I actually understand what is happening with my data or my processes. Now, when you contrast this with what a typical reasoning system actually looks like, now let's say you have a business question where either things are breaking or they are going exceptionally well, and now you want to carry forward those learnings. Uh, that query then gets grounded in the ontology. So at the end of the day, an ontology is a connected representation of your business, your worldviews, your processes. And we come up with a causal chain understanding across different variables. Now, these variables might be in your data. These variables might be something that would have been looked into historically, or even something that is going outside in the world that is pretty relevant for the kind of analysis that you want to do. So there, all the grounding of that query comes from the data ontology, the domain ontology, and the decision ontology, where data ontology brings together the different sources of data that exist in different systems in, let's say, different temporal dimensions or even governance. On top of that, we bring in the domain ontology, which is a causal understanding of the domain that you're operating in, the function that you're operating in, the industry that you're operating in. And on top of that, we have decision ontology, which brings together all the decisions that might have happened in the past, things that are also forward looking in nature. What are the outcomes? What are the trade offs? What would be a causal impact of the kind of reasoning that you're doing and the decision outcomes that it is leading to? So, all of this ontology grounding is then something that goes through a multi-layered reasoning sort of agentic system where we have multiple agents, each of them fine-tuned on certain kinds of reasoning analysis that can do. So you can think of this as the one place where, let's say, a root cause analysis can happen, forecasting, optimization, stress testing, things of those prominence and importance. And then eventually, what you get as an answer is, of course, not just the analysis, but also insights and certain implications or next best actions that you can take over it. So, this is at its very essence the difference between retrieval and reasoning, and the kind of opportunity analysis, or just in a broader sense, the kind of advantages that this unlocks is, of course, being a been a utopian vision for businesses for a long time, and we are glad that we are finally able to bring it to life today. So, with this understanding, just a general sense of what are the primitives that don't really exist in retrieval based systems today, because of which enterprise reasoning has been such an unsolved problem of all the yesteryears gone by. One is that there is no causality as a primitive when it comes to general retrieval. There is just at max more of a this contains that kind of a worldview that gets captured. But the true causal chains and how it actually impacts your business outcomes or decisions is something that is never quite captured. The second is that when it comes to retrieval, at the end of the day, you always depend on the LLMs to sort of infer the world model that exists out there. And while LLMs are great at being able to compress all the internet data that is out there, it diverges from the business nuances that actually exist at a causal level or at a process level today. So that is the second thing. The third thing is that when it comes to agentic systems, typically in reasoning, these systems uh, tend to lack verifiability and auditability. So you are never quite sure where the answers are coming from, which is why there is always this sort of hungo about hallucinations, things not being verified, things being a black box. And these are the exact kind of problems for which you actually need a reasoning system, because now you want your answers to have provenance, to have the trail of reasoning of this is the analysis that we have done on what sources, what the AI is understanding, what is the deterministicity of the system that you're using. Because if you're making like high stakes decisions, you can't quite afford randomness or probabilistic models being at the helm of it. So these are typically the three primitives that don't really exist in retrieval based systems today, because of which enterprise reasoning has been a largely unsolved problem. And what it eventually shows up in is the depth of questions that those systems can answer. So a retrieval based system will typically answer your what question? What was our revenue last year or last quarter? Could you summarize these four or five things that you see today? Versus something that an enterprise reasoning system actually unlocks. And that is why we exist. So these will be all of your multi-source, deeper why questions. What are the sort of interventions? What are the implications that it can produce? And things of these nature. So with all of this said and done, maybe it's time that we just show and not tell anymore and get down to the platform itself. Any questions at this point? Happy to answer, or we can just dive right into the platform.
And while Rishank pulls out the demo, just to sum up, I think pretty much if you have a question that what was my sales March 2024, That's what retrieval is about. But if you have to answer a question that I want to increase my sales 20% next quarter, suggest me a plan. That requires reasoning, that requires underlying understanding of what are the things on which sales depends upon, and that
Hmm.
causality chain in nature. So that's kind of, if I would say that if retrieval is dictionary, reasoning is more of being able to uh, query in a lot more orchestrated manner. That's kind of what's the delta looks like. Um, Go ahead, Shang. I think you have the slides, like the product demo on now.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, of course, correlation does not imply causation. And that is where the whole enterprise reasoning game becomes so much more like impactful, valuable, and difficult to solve for. So yeah, say hello to the DecisionX platform again. And for those of you who have seen this before, of course, you will probably get to see a revamped sidebar, which also shows the kind of feedback that has been coming in, the flurry of shipping changes that we have been making along the way for a better end user experience. So the first thing to see here is the project that we have. So this is synthetic representation of the work that we have been meaningfully engaging with on the CPG side. So here you will see like a typical synthetic sort of data sets which capture all of those nuances. So all of the wide variety of sources and functions. So you have your SKU performance, so essentially the SKU name, category, what has been the start date, units sold, and all your usual suspects. The other is more along marketing spend. Then there is, of course, customer transactions, cohort retentions, and offline distribution. Now, of course, all of these data, the moment you plug them in, whether that be local files, all your end user apps, or the general warehouses that you've been using today, we have data agents at our end which clean up the file, normalize it, and then start preparing ontology on top of it. Now, while ontology is something that has been talked about before, this is pretty much just as a primer of how the ontology then looks like, where there are certain entities, objects, and concepts that we have derived. And it is this sort of three-layered ontology on which the entire reasoning is based on. So the first thing that starts off is signals. So think of signals as typically the kind of insights that you want every day at 9 a.m. And these can not be just what queries, which typically end up in a dashboard, and then you end up sort of searching through 200 dashboards, but your why questions that are now showing up in a report format. So if let's say I open up any one of these signals, now of course these can be set up at a functional level or at a even a role level hierarchy. So here, let's say I click on one. So the first thing to see here is the kind of answer that actually shows up in a signal. So now instead of looking at just a bunch of numbers with no meaning, you are actually looking at an executive ready report with three things. The first is the summarized view, the second is a deep dive view, and the third is the trail. Summarized view is all of your top snapshots. So for example, in this particular signal, I have asked about revenue decline. So you typically want, why are new SKUs generating lower revenue in their first year than launches from 2 years ago? Now, this is something that you always want to stay on top of in case something is going amiss and you want an early warning signal that there is something that you would probably need to dive deeper on. So, under summarized view, you would actually see how the multi agent system at the back has gone about the reasoning and the top snapshots of it. So, here you would see what the first year launch cohort snapshot looks like. What is the revenue gap? What are the average weekly units? You also get to see the important sort of charts and insights along with a general explanation of what it be. And then there are cohort metrics detail. And ultimately, it ends up with analysis and implications so that you can always figure out what are the sort of next best actions that you can take on top of it. So while this is all part of the summarized view, under deep dive, you can actually see the entire rationale of what the key findings were, what were the mid table joins that were done to actually come up with that summarized view, and of course, at the end of it, the entire gamut of implications from which the top ones were chosen for the summarized view. So this gives you actionable recommendations for new SKU launches, for portfolio decision making. What does the confidence in data scope look like? And while all of this was part of the deep dive view, under trail is where we bring the entire sort of importance of provenance into the picture. So you can actually see the sources that were used, the reasoning chain that was followed. Ultimately, what was the query logic across all the tables that was done? Now, this of course becomes very important for defending the decisions that you can't quite get wrong. So you can actually steer these queries in the way that you want to, or you can just continue and chat from here and start diving deeper into the kind of reasoning that has been done right from here. Now, the entire thing that you see under summarized view is something that can be customized to your taste or your templates. So not just at a theme level, but also in the way you want to consume this insight. So let's say this is a combo chart. Now you just want to see a bar chart. You can change to that. If you just want to see a line chart, you can change to that. Uh, it gets automatically refreshed with the underlying data that comes in. You can choose to download this as an image or just pin it to a dashboard where it then continues to come up as sort of your live view. Now, while all of this is something that is coming on in a report that can always be plumbed into your email or Slack because we have a delivery setup here, the other thing is that since it is always running, we always tend to do an anomaly detection on top of the insights that are coming in. So what you see on the left is that each time this particular signal is run, what has changed since last time, why it might matter, and what could be the next best action that you should take over it at a macro level. So every day at 9 a.m., you can just come here or have it plugged into your Slack or email and have this set of insights at a deeper level coming in. Now, while all of this is under signals, let's get into the meaty portions of reasoning.
So while Rishank,
Yeah.
just to add some colors on this, more from a
Yeah.
business angle, we're working
Mm,
with one of the largest FMCG company globally, where
mm,
there is this business head problem statement is I have 500, like 300 brands and 500 SKUs, and I have got a 3,000 people workforce essentially on the sales side.
mm,
I need to know, if not daily, at a weekly level, like what is going wrong, why, and not just what is going wrong, why it is going
mm,
wrong, what I
mm,
can do around it. And at different
mm,
hierarchies, there are cluster managers, there are territory managers, there are sales reps, individual field force that is there.
mm,
Now, they are running currently with 365 dashboards. That's like one dashboard a day in the year. And
mm,
the challenge is the cognitive compression requires to actually stitch together what really, like at best, you can know what is happening. How do you know why it is happening? And
mm,
the why finding for them, which is the root cause analysis, they are only able to do once in 30 days because
mm,
root cause analysis is a project,
mm,
the once in a 30 days kind of a thing. Now, what this has facilitated for them at different hierarchy levels is
mm,
that every morning 9 a.m. people are knowing at
mm,
different levels what has gone
mm,
wrong, why it has gone wrong. If
mm,
I need to dig deeper, there's a continuing chat I can do. So this is like you going and looking at 20 things, 365 dashboards, you going stitching together all the probable why reasons versus a AI working for you, which analyzes cross-functionally everything, brings the whys to you, suggests you next best action. Um, and means before pre-AI days, it used to be that consultants are required actually to come and tell you recommendations. And all analytics platforms stopped at insights or dashboards. I think for the very first time, it is very possible, 100% grounded in context of your organizational data with the specificity that you require. So you would have seen that the recommendation, actionable recommendation here is actually grounded in organizational context. So it's not coming like generic recommendation. Okay, sales is down, then have more people. The answer is sales is down because X shifted, marketing Y shifted. These are the both macro and micro nature of reasoning. So very grounded, very actionable, very domain worthy. The sales guy feels like, okay, this is an answer meant for me, something that I can act upon. And this has been becoming a great source for surfacing blind spots. In large complex organization, the blind spot sort of compounds so quickly that by the time you go and do the root cause analysis, your window of opportunity to act is actually gone. So that's what Signal is in a more business context for everyone.
mm. Yeah.
For
And
Rishank.
And I'm glad that you mentioned the RCA case because then I have an idea for what to run in reasoning today. So yeah, when you come to reasoning, this is essentially the meaty portion of the platform where you can now run all kinds of deep reasoning questions on your data. And the way uh, Sir also mentioned that there are so many causal chains that you want to investigate for which you had to depend on external quote unquote expertise, but that is already there in the company today and as tribal knowledge as well, and that has never quite been used. In fact, this reminded me of this series called Person of Interest, where they show like something called the machine being able to pick out blind spots and predict certain events, and that is typically where DecisionX is also headed. So you'll now get a flavor of it. So yes, as part of this project, let's do an RCA itself. So let me ask why let's say which SKUs are underperforming, because I of course want to know which ones, but more importantly, and why. So let's see how the system performs here. You can of course pick one bucket from any of these. What you see here is typically the analysis mode, and what these modes are all about is something that we'll cover as part of going through the system.
So while the answer
So,
gets picked up, the point that we wanted to highlight was uh,
hmm,
retrieval can answer what question, it cannot answer why. And why
hmm,
requires causality, and that
hmm,
requires a contextual why requires ontology which is grounded in causality. So
yeah,
that's kind of the differentiator. While
hmm,
we are showing a root cause analysis question, you can do forecasting, you can do optimization, you can
hmm,
do scenario planning, and pretty much the
hmm,
thought process at our end has been these are the things which becomes underlying infrastructure for decision making. Decision making
hmm,
is not probably about, okay, knowing what has changed is just one component of it. Sales has gone down is one component of it. Why it has changed? Can I stress test for various kinds of scenario? Do I know what kind of implication can happen if I make a certain decision, which can read across my marketing, sales, finance, operations, all of that together? That's how a CXO or a business head would go about making a decision. So that's why reasoning is one of the core components of the decision infrastructure that we have. So yeah, while the question is being asked, you'll see that the thinking steps
hmm,
of how AI has gone about reasoning
hmm,
it. It has explored the context. It has explored data which is sitting into multiple
hmm,
silos, gone about planning, gone about querying specific
hmm,
sources, synthesize all of that together. So this is like a AI
hmm,
which is working for you 24/7, bringing all these nuances together, finally to create an answer and a result in a report. And
hmm,
we'll probably see it very soon. So it takes
yeah,
about and it takes about 30 seconds to answer, but kind of
hmm,
interesting point that we have is this is
hmm,
something that used to take like 20 days. Now, 20 days
hmm,
to 30 seconds is the efficiency gain in terms of speed of decision making that we're talking about. And from a
hmm.
context perspective, yeah, Rishank, the answer seems to be here. You want to walk through.
Yeah, so from a context perspective, what tends to happen is that since now it's grounded in your ontology, we'll actually see the depth of the answer that then comes through. So, starting off right from the summarized view itself, so it has identified which are the underperforming SKUs, which are the ones that are most at risk, what are the number of newest units sold, and what are the kind of groupings of issues that have come up for the riskiest of the SKUs. So, you will get the entire data table. What is the brand? What is the category? What does the inventory aggregation looks like? Has there been certain return rate or offline sell through that has come in? And of course, the performance status of that being underperforming. Now, going ahead, it also pinpoints why these SKUs are underperforming at your sort of causal lens of your business. So, the most common issue has been that there is a category average that exists as part of this domain and the kind of SKUs that are talked about. And here, what it sees is that there has been a volume erosion versus the category average that is there. Now, there is an above average return rate, which is affecting the vast majority of the underperforming ones post this erosion. And then there are certain sort of drill down of reasoning that the system has performed. So you now get to see that there is high inventory aging and below average offline sell through. That is now affecting a vast majority of the underperforming ones that were identified. And then eventually it comes to which is the riskiest one and what are the sort of measures that the particular SKU is falling short on. And while this is all in the summarized view, if we go into deep dive, we actually get to see how this drill down was performed, right from the key findings that the system is coming up with, what is the most pressured category in which all these SKUs are grouped together, what are the most frequent root causes because of which it is happening, and why is it failing on all those four measures, the kind of data joins that have been performed in between, and the reason of actually performing those joins in the first place. If I just scroll through, you start getting more of an aggregated result at every level. So there is an underperforming SKU comparison at a category level. There is a root cause comparison of these are the kind of issues that have been impacting certain kinds of underperforming SKUs and what that interpretation looks like for you. What does the general segmentation then looks like when you marry all of these insights together, and what does the distribution of those segments look like? Going a step further, the system has figured what are the actionable rules that can be implemented, what are the implications and recommendations that can be done at a segment level, which has been identified as part of the analysis. Ultimately, the system, being an honest one, also gives you the confidence of the analysis that has been performed and the general data scope of whatever has been done. So
Rishank, if
this
you
shows up.
can, Rishank, if you can stay on the actionable recommendation, I think I would like to add some color. So,
Yes.
so a quick one. So let's say if you take a Claude or a GPT and plug this data together, and my question being, if I go about asking this question,
Hmm.
you will always find it gives you a very generic recommendation. It will never go about building a contextual recommendation. What I mean by contextual is it actually citing exact SKUs, the delta that's there, what needs to be done, not in the generic sense, but what really is a cause effect relationship that exists in your data. So, like for deep demand plus inventory stress, it says that cut near term replenishment for specific SKUs. It's not giving a generic recommendation. For return driven underperformance, again picked up, this is the second kind of issue which needs to be addressed. And for offline conversion weakness. So, three issues it highlighted and clubbed everything to, and then sort of given a quick inference of if you want to make an impact on SKU 0 to 9, this is what you got to do. Now think of it like from a business scenario. Now I'm a business leader who does not have time in life, and essentially I want answer of this quickly, so to know, but without losing the depth of the answer. Now, this is something that you cannot do straight up LLM, where it hallucinates majorly straight up if you put it on data. Just the recommendations and the sharpness of it is where the brilliance of the ontology and context and everything that we talk about comes in. And this is what makes us world number two in terms of enterprise reasoning and only Indian company to be in the top 10 list there. Yeah, Rishank, go ahead.
Yeah. So just building upon that, there is a trail where you actually get to see the provenance aspects. So while there are certain business values that get unlocked simply by the depth of reasoning, if you are a data or analytics person, you would typically know that when you're trying to orchestrate a multi-agent system, the one thing that always is something that becomes like a backbeater is where exactly is the agent reasoning from, or where is it actually retrieving the data from to reason over. And all of these things then become a problem of context degradation. So you start writing reasoning engines left, right, center. The context is continuing to degrade because things are moving in the business, even at a monthly level or at a quarter level. And there are things already moving at a day to day level. And none of this is quite getting captured or being maintained. And all of this then feeds into the depth or sharpness of the reasoning insights that you see. And that is something that we pride ourselves a lot on. And then that eventually shows up as a lacking indicator on the kind of benchmarks that we are able to ace. So, yeah, here you would then see that these are the sources that have been used, what has been the reasoning chain, the particular tables that were selected, the grouping that was done, what has eventually been the query logic, and ultimately the SQL query that you can see. So,
If you
all of
are
this
if you are part
comes.
of any of the regulated industry, be it financial
Mhm,
services, be it pharma, let's say, now the de facto
mhm,
expectation is that reasoning can't be a black box. AI can't just suggest something without being auditable. Tomorrow, if something goes wrong, what is the underlying grounding to what really the answer was? What was its acceptance? So, as we went about working with some of the regulated industries, I think these are like now table stakes that everyone expect. And very proud to say we were one of the first ones to bring trail into the and verifiability and auditability into the system. And think of it like ultimately you want to evaluate everything before you deploy at large scale to really know how the AI reasons. There could have been like lakhs of tables and rows and columns and whatnot. Is the AI actually able to go and pick the right file, right column, synthesize all that together? Can it do it 24/7 at scale? And that's the difference between something which looks great at POC versus something that scales at enterprise level for a decision grade kind of reasoning plot. So yeah, Rishank.
Yeah. So while all of this is something that comes packaged as part of something called the analysis mode, we also have multiple modes as part of reasoning. So think of it this way that you came to sort of create certain decision outcomes that you wanted. You went about reasoning through the system. There were so many analysis chains that you went through. There was so much causal relationships that the system had surfaced for you. Now, at the end of the day, you also want to be able to package that all together for either your next session or the people in your team so that it carries forward. And today, that collaborative aspect on reasoning is in itself a task. So instead of going through all of those hoops, what you can simply do is select any of these modes. So let's say I pick slides mode, and there are a bunch of slide settings that you can do so as to bring your own taste and the way your teams talk with each other. So for example, here there is a tone set by default of an executive brief, the number of slides you want, the kind of images that you would want to put in. You can bring in your reporting templates that you tend to have, and then ultimately you can just type in here to create a summary of the analysis. So let's say now you set that into motion. Now, again, you would see under the thinking steps that it infers what the reasoning has been, what are the kind of answers that have come up. And then we'll sort of get into figuring out what were the chains that were followed to eventually come to a general understanding of what that slide might look like or what might be the best for anybody else to figure out what the reasoning is being. So this again, since it's grounded in your ontology, there is no sort of gibberish language that can randomly seep in. So I think one big problem that anybody working with, even let's say a Claude Code or a Cowork, which is supposed to be an agent orchestration system, is that there are always these mythical and mystical objects that enter as you go about doing multi-source reasoning and trying to share it across with people. So there'll be these words that creep in. There'll be some analysis insights that will creep in, and the numbers won't quite match up. So to that level of deterministicity is what the system has actually been built for. So all the answers that you see here, we constantly have this loop that keeps on running, where we don't just want the AI to sound right, we actually want the AI to be right. And that is what is something that will then show up as you go about seeing the slides here. So it has actually come around to planning what the pieces would, which are important for this particular slides, and it has now generated those presentation slides, structuring it accordingly. And these are actually the parts where having a multi-agent system at the back actually comes into the picture, because now it's looping through the entire context that has gathered, your session, the sources, and eventually it will come up with the slides that is supposed to be.
Just a call out means I think last 10 years pre-AI world, just doing an analysis takes so much time, and bringing all this analysis to actually create something which can be presentable to an executive, your decision maker itself was a task. And I think now you are able to get that in like 30 seconds odd. One of the challenges with if you use OpenAI or Claude is you can never really have a sharp presentation deck, report analysis, because there's so much of external this, that context that sort of keeps on seeping in, which Rishank mentioned. Yeah, seems like presentation is up. Can you run this, Rishank?
Yeah. So let me just view it. And I think the first thing to notice is just the quality of the presentation. This is something that we were very particular of, because never wanted to put like pixelated slides or have just random low quality slides come in. So the first thing to see is just the quality. But now coming actually into what the slides are captured. So it actually brings forward, okay, this is an SKU performance analysis that we have done here. What are the key numbers and insights that were important as part of the analysis that was done? Here it has come up with the particular insight that we were able to derive, where this is the particular category which has the heaviest burden. What do those category numbers or aggregations look like with interactive charts, the breakdown? Eventually, it has come up with the number one root cause where things seem to be hurting at the sales velocity end. What is typically driving those failures? What does the total conversion rate then look like when you look at particular root causes? Eventually, it comes up with these are the critical cases that definitely need an intervention at the moment, and why there are certain SKUs that fail on execution, not on demand. So it has tried to give you that nuanced distinction based on the causal understanding of your business, where there are certain kinds of failures, and eventually it has come up with what can be done now. So separate demand problems from execution problems, how to actually go about it, what are the priority actions to actually reverse this underperformance across all the SKU types and distinct root causes that it had identified. So this is the depth of slides and the quality of slides that get produced. You can choose to download it or just save it as part of reports in the system, and then that gets shared across with the relevant stakeholders. So yeah, with this, I think I would like to draw curtains on the live demo portions. I'm sure there'll be a bunch of questions that we'll answer as we go through. But with this, I would want to give sort of the podium to Ranjan sir and Shantha to actually discuss more of a practitioner point of view on enterprise reasoning. They have like been in way more sort of high stakes strategic decisions that we can even comprehend, and they have quite the scars, the learnings, and sort of the accomplishments that come with going through the entire life cycle of making high stakes decisions. So over to you too.
Thanks a lot, Rishank. Thanks for running through. I know we are left with about 20 minutes kind of time. So I have Shanta with me, and I think the highlight part of the for the session is this conversation. So Shanta needs no introduction. I did a bit of that early on. It was hard to read her resume because she has accomplished so much for 30 years. Thanks a lot, Shanta, for being with us. So Shanta, quick one. I think you saw the demo, some bit of flavors of what the platform does. I have a little operator lens of uh, what does decision making looks like. And when we started, one of the first problems that came to my mind, and pretty much everyone intuitively knows this. Any enterprise, name any enterprise, $1 billion company plus, there is no dearth of tool. There is hundreds of consultant working. There is analytics firms. There is strategy consulting firms. There are 200 dashboards. There are so many analytics tools. And tools for various kind of things. There's a forecasting tool. There is a optimization tool. All kind of things. Purely from a decision making standpoint, and you have led large teams. Two problems. Where does this decision, and still we know that enterprise decision making is slow, and it sort of dilutes to a lack of quality beyond a certain time, and the great leadership is about that. They are able to wind this all together and make still very sharp decisions. So how do you see this? Why does this happen? What's your take?
So firstly, I think, like you said, I think it was a lovely and a very engaging demo for me. I was so engrossed in it, and it's a lovely strategy companion in my head. So that's thanks to you, Rishank, for doing that. So see, I think in any organization, be it I have been a strategy officer myself. So when you look at an internal organization or when we advise clients, I think you took the example of consumer goods here, or if you take the life sciences examples, right? So there are various aspects of decisions that we take in our organizations, be it internal when I take, if I run a line of business, or even if I run a large enterprise, my responsibility as a strategy leader to the board or the executive leadership becomes like I'm able to bring about the decisions of foresights, not just the insights. I think that's going to be very important for where the organization will be and should be. What are the projected risks? I think the biggest challenge many a times is about what are those projected risks, because as a board, you want to know those risks ahead of time, not when it has happened or when it is about to happen so close. So the blind spots that you talked about, I think in the demo I heard that, and I don't know what I don't know. And many a times those are some of the very important challenges, I think, as a strategy officer, that you better be prepared whether you're walking in for an executive leadership forum or whether you're walking in for a board level, decision forum. I think it's extremely important, apart from all the lovely balance sheet parameters that we must have, right? So how our business has been, how the line of business is functioning. The most important aspect on the board is always about, okay, where are we not working, what is not working in our organization, and what are some of the risks that we are anticipating or not anticipating, and how are we prepared as an organization for that. What are some of the external factors that probably could have a risk factor associated, and thereby it can create a lot of projection scenarios. So the whole reasoning aspect of why, I think, becomes all the more extremely critical and important. So like you said, there are definitely a lot of tools, but I think most of them, as we have seen built up over the period of time, many of them have somehow lacked to give us that contextual aspect. I think you spoke so much on context. Either it's because of siloed data, or it's, the systems are not talking to each other, it's so fragmented. So it just doesn't give you that confidence in terms of that organization context. I think that is one of the biggest issue. I think the second dimension that I also see many a times is because we are all humans end of the day. I know we create a lot of biases as well. So sometimes as a strategy leader, or even when people come to us for investments, there are these bias of decisions on certain projects or certain investments. I think, for example, in life sciences and all of that, these are all very, very big investments. Taking a decision on M&A versus doing an R&D on your own, I think is huge organization decision. Or for that matter, I think you talked about the trail aspect. It
Hmm.
is so important in a life sciences organization about, when there is a situation. Let's say there is a, drug recall, or let us say there is a manufacturing audit that has happened and something has really gone wrong, or for that matter, something has really failed in your trial recovery. I think there are so many very important scenarios which are really so critical. And at that time, all the trails and evidences are so critical and crucial. So many times what happens is some of these data points become so unavailable, and thereby it just doesn't help how many ever systems you have, how many ever aspects, whatever people can bring. I think these are some of the very important fundamentals that becomes very, very critical. And I'm happy to see some of those things are there. And you spoke so much about foresights, which I think gave me a lot of comfort, because many a times it's not just the insights of what has happened, it's about the foresight of what will happen. And I think that's the answer as a strategy officer or as board or executive leadership. I think we really, really want to see, because that really affects our business enterprise on a near term and as well on a short term.
Sure. No, thanks a lot, Shanta. I think you touched upon a lot of points, but I think the most critical takeaway for me was one, how do you bring foresight, which is not just looking backwards, but forward, and that is what makes exceptional leadership decisions, right? The second point you made, which was very valid, was the context of the organization and how really that bakes in, because every organization is a living entity in itself. It has its own soul and DNA. So how do you actually bring something which is sharp,
Yes.
contextual, domain worthy, and that becomes super important. One of the learnings, Shanta, we had was that, and as we went about interviewing a lot of decision makers across different enterprise, was all the analytics tools, a lot of this platform sort of stops at insights or analytics, which is where I have got a lot of what's captured. I might have some hypothesis of whys, and from insights to decision journey keeps on diluting at every stage.
Yes.
So you have got a
Yeah.
bunch of insights. Now you want to know why it has happened. It dilutes a little because there's lesser tools and you require people to comprehend all of that. Then from why, if I want to go to hence what needs to be done, it further dilutes because you will realize that very few people can answer some of these hard questions. Like insights, everyone has got insights to why to hence what needs to be done. And when it comes further to actually stress test, okay, out of these five things, the three things that I have to do, that's when you have to look foresight, like forward. What is the likely impact of this? And if you narrow down the funnel, what my learning has been, out of 1,000 people who can consume insights, and probably a lakh people who can consume data, the insights to why probably 100 people can answer. And from there to next best action, probably 15 people can answer. And then there is actually three people who comes down to who can have that foresight to say, hey, these three are great, these five are great, but these three are the ones which has got a forward looking impact in our favor. And I think you sort of very intuitively described that decision making process. It took me quite a few interviews to sort of get to where the dilution sort of happens. And one of the some of the leaders always told me that decisions are data driven. That's a theme we talked for last 10 years, 15 years. I think it's beyond data and insights. There is a lot of compression of cognitive compression that happens, goes through a context, it goes through forward-looking approach. And we felt at least when we go about building this decision infrastructure, that's a lot more composite problem to actually look at. That how do I bring that 1,000 to 3 people infrastructure for larger mass in a institutional way.
Absolutely. Especially, I think, see, like you beautifully said, right? I think that is where still the human lens is so critical and important. Uh, and that is also the reason if AI can get to that level of confidence and the way you showed, right, the whole reasoning aspect in it can get to that level of specificity. I think it gives us that much time as a strategy leader, as a board, for us to think about what are those wise aspects within the three or within the five. What are those which are worthy as a business risk for us to pursue? What are the ones which we really want to invest more? What are the ones which we have learned and thereby we want to course correct? I think all of those are the places where I think as a board, as an executive leadership, as a strategy leader, I think these are the places where I think our human decisions are still vitally important. And if something like this can give us that level of intelligent companionship to that order of reasoning, that order of evidence making and all of that, I think that very powerfully augments the boards and the executive leadership for those important critical decisions that really matter for the organization, and also associated business risks, right? Because today, with all the geopolitical scenarios, there's a lot of things all of us as strategy leaders, executive CEOs, where I think it is so important for us to know that our business or our context of organization is not too much affected by the external shocks or not affected by some of these external factors where it is possible to minimize. So I would say, I think those are all the important aspects where human still has a lot of time to be spent on, and thereby a decision X model or a reason model like that can give us that powerful value. I think that is super amazing with a high level of confidence.
Thanks a lot, Shanta. A quick one now, while we touched upon what makes us reach to decision, I think the second critical part, and as interviewing bunch of CXOs at large enterprises, and kind of another very interesting takeaway was okay, you made a decision and everything builds up to decision. There is a whole teams running around, making decks, dashboards, stitching together context, applying lenses, possibly what my CXO wants to see as a view. All of that happens. And then there is this meeting where, decision is being made. You proposed four choices. Somebody who has lived through experience, understand, has the ability to compress all of that into the foresight and see through potential risk and opportunities and impact, makes those decisions. Great. The decisions are made. What happens after decision? Like how many times we actually, and I have been in those shoes as well, right? And what I learned was very interesting phenomena that decision equal to a meeting done. That's how organizations sort of go about it, and that decision is in a QBR or a review deck, and the downstream of it is a little lost. And so, just want to understand what's your take in terms of what happens post the decision. How do you go about looking at it, measuring it? How do you say that a decision was success?
Yeah, so I think, and I am fully with you. I think so many a times, sometimes people feel, okay, decision is done and it's almost like already it is implemented or it's already achieved. I think the real crux of any strategy is in execution, right? So which means a decision is just a decision, but I think the reality and the throughput of that impact of that is really in the final results that come. It could be on the revenue that it had to impact, or it's on the profitability, or it's on the margin, it's on a product. I mean, it could be any of those which the decision had to possibly impact. See, I think the execution plays a very important lens, which means the ability to monitor and see almost on a dynamic basis, right? What if that scenario changes, or what if that trigger is changing, or what if that context is changing? I think this whole dynamic aspect, and in reality today, in a physical world today, this whole aspect is such a mind-blowing effort. I mean, we put so many more strategy teams, we put so many people to keep doing this. Somebody does it on a daily basis, somebody does it on a weekly basis, somebody does it on a quarterly basis, and then you're suddenly waking up one fine and sitting again as a board or an executive leadership and thinking, okay, what has happened to this decision? How is it moved? How is it not moved? By the time, things could be too late as well. So many a times, I think it's the lack of the systems and the power of the intelligence and the ability to be able to bring it on quickly. Especially as leaders, we always want to know the bad news first. That's really what we want to know. And if you can tell us that almost every day, the bad news first and the risks of something not working first, I think that's the beautiful thing that somebody can give us as executive leaders. And I think that's a biggest challenge when it comes to these decisions. If people are not following through, and thereby it just becomes a huge nightmare of that whole process. And sometimes it just eventually also fatigues. It just dies its natural way, or it kind of just lands into a surprise moment. Aha, by the way, something was supposed to be done, but what happened to it? And there is absolutely no trail of it, no trace of it. So I think for us, bad news first, almost real-time decision analysis. If somebody can tell what did not work, what are those things that may have a risk on almost everyday basis on that particular decision, I think those are all really some amazing things that can happen, so that we really see through it. Otherwise, it just becomes like, sometimes the transformation projects are like this, where they finish the transformation project and then figure out, okay, did it really do what it was supposed to do? And it's such a post facto, right? And today, none of us have the time in the world in terms of the agility. In fact, I feel like we have to go beyond agility, and I actually called it fluidity in some other conversation. We have to be so fluid with respect to our decisions, with respect to our course corrections, with respect to the changing tweaks, because the scenario around us is changing so dynamically that I think it requires that level of fluidity. So I hope that gives a little bit of perspective. If you don't do, what are the things that happens? But if you do, I think as executives, as strategy leaders, I think for us, the bad news, the risks, the issues, I think these are like really like wonderful things for us to hear. And then, of course, we definitely want to see the value realization pretty quickly. I don't think we want to wait like for 3 months and 6 months for us to see what it really resulted, or what it not did not really result in, and things like that. We don't want that kind of post-mortem analysis. Rather, if that can be a real-time view, that's like super.
So, no, thanks a lot, Shanta. The analogy that I give is decision making is like climbing up the hill. So there's a lot of people start climbing up the hill, reaches to that pinnacle point, and then everyone comes very quickly down. Essentially, there's a decision made, okay, there's investment or project approves, and yes, there is execution and all, but I think scenario changes. These are long-term executions, context changes. Are those iterations sharpening happening in a lot more institutional way? So what I've learned is that more than pre-decisions, the post-decision is a bigger challenge. What is the track of it in terms of impact? And are there systems that can show me the decision was made with a certain impact and causality in mind? Are those deviating? And if those are
Exactly.
deviating, then essentially, again, what is the next best action to be done and why it is deviating? So that's kind of a very interesting component that we're trying to build in decision infrastructure. Uh,
Wonderful.
One of the things with this loop that happens, and we have realized that now with we power over 10,000 plus decisions across enterprise, what we are learning is that the moment we are going about this closed cycle, at least 45% of uh, the patterns of failure nodes are repeatable. There's a common pattern to it, where same set of things went into leading to a wrong decision making. The same set of thing was found in RCA and it repeats. And
Interesting.
one of the challenges hence I had was, as this decision cycle goes by in any company, and including me, party to that for last 10 years, do we have an institutional learning out of it to really say that, hey, these are the things that has not gone right in past, and hence what makes you believe that this new decision is going to work out in a very similar kind of context? And kind of that's where I think at least my understanding was that there is no place in any enterprise where decisions are logged. I cannot go and search for historically what my prior leader has made as decisions and what were the causality and trade-offs, both this side and that side, in terms of decision. And I realized that decision repository is probably one of the strongest suite to have for anyone to look at and stress test and do decision onto. Pretty much right now, like every time a decision is to be made, it starts from scratch, making same set of mistakes, going through the same hoop of things. You made very interesting point that the downstream impact and the success of decision is truly in that execution and the impact being realized. And if I can have real time alerts, real time point of views of this deviation, that sort of brings us CSO life simplified.
Also, the point that you made, no, Ranjan, right now, I think the repeated failures, repeated moments, I think it all, if it gives us a pattern where as there can be change of human behaviors, there can be change of system behaviors, there can be, I think that's also a wonderful byproduct as well, because if there are failures, there is a way possibly some of them can be eliminated. Of course, we may make new mistakes, which is fine, but then at least you're not repeating the same ones, right? So that is also a wonderful perspective. I think if there is something like that that can also come out of that, I think that pattern is also going to be very helpful for an organization, and especially from a agility of the enterprise standpoint. So I think that's a good point as well, I
Thanks a lot. And we're trying to solve this, how
feel.
we can augment decision making, because ultimately the more strategic decision making we can up ourselves to, then I think at least tactical and operational decision making can be a little more automated in that sense. Last question, which is, Shanta, I know that you're pressed on time. I'll take 2 minutes more. Many times when we talk about AI can augment decision making, it brings up a lot of that decision making element. We hear a sense of scare, right? Like people think that, okay, uh, is that AI is going to make decisions? And there is a whole lot of thing around what all things AI can do or should do, and what all things humans should do, and then what is the right balance around it. And that has led to fear of jobs, fear of all kinds of things. So just in a general sense, as you have seen advent of old world, new world, pre-post AI era, how do you see this balance, particularly in terms of like things like strategy, decision making, all of that stuff? Where do we strike that chord?
So, see, I think in my mind, AI pre era, post era, human anatomy is the biggest technology machine. Okay, so that continues to stay. I think what is possibly aiding us today, and with the power of all of these aspects, is if I can be a better strategy officer than yesterday, in terms of being supplemented with better evidence, better data, better insights, better positioning of why I have understood about my organization's scenarios, performance, and that context of what my organization has to do. If I'm better supplemented by the respective AI tools or such kind of AI companions, I think it only makes my life and the quality of the decisions I make for the organization, because organization lives beyond me or a group of leaders, a group of executives, a group of board members. So I think from that context, I think it plays a very powerful companion aid. And I think today, with all these geopolitical scenarios that we are all going through, there are things we know, there are things we don't know. As CEOs, as boards, I think that's the most important, toughest part today, making decisions. Because I think there are many scenarios that we don't know around us, some things that is impacting, or situations that are impacting around us. And in that situation, what is the best you can do with the best possible available data, with the best possible available insights, with the best possible available risks that you are aware of for the future, and thereby what is the decision you're making, and can that decision be documented with all those context, so that tomorrow when we have to revisit this, it really becomes very relevant. So in my mind, pre-era, post-era, human anatomy stays still the most important thing, but what it really helps is this whole augmentation, that it has come more than ever before, and the fluidity of this decision is so important today because of the things that is so dynamic around us. So that's kind of my take on how the world is today, pre and post.
Thanks a lot, Shanta. I think I'm an all-time believer of the fact that you can make things faster with AI, you can make things augmented by AI, but sense of judgment and sense of taste is something that this anatomy is very hard to beat, and we stay there and happy to hear you resonating with the same. Um, Thanks a lot, Shanta. I think super, super exciting conversation. We touched upon a lot of aspects, pre, post decisions, AI, human balance. I think a lot of takeaways, but I think one of the things that I'm definitely having as a takeaway is the 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 institutionalization of decision making, and you talked about a lot of components around it, and how AI can really bring that kind of efficiency at a executive level. So that's kind of my takeaway. I know you are pressed with time. Thanks a lot for being with us and speaking with such a depth and clarity. Thanks a lot, Shanta. Thanks, Rishank. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
So that brings us to end of this webinar. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining in, for hearing us out, watching the demo. Hope you could see the platform and enterprise reasoning live in action. Thanks a lot for your time. Thank you.